23 days of silence changed everything. Not because I couldn't hear the world around me, but because of what I discovered when my hearing mysteriously returned. When you live in complete deafness, people believe they can speak freely about anything, including you. My daughter believed this too. What I overheard upon returning from the hospital that October morning made me question everything I thought I knew about family, love, and loyalty. But it also handed me the perfect opportunity to turn the tables on those who had written me off as yesterday's news. Before we dive into this incredible tale of deception, betrayal, and ultimate justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments which state you're watching from. Your support means everything to this channel. The heart monitor's rhythmic beeping pierced through the silence like a divine orchestra. After 23 days trapped in a world without sound, that simple electronic pulse resonated more beautifully than any symphony Eleanor and I had ever swayed to during our 43 years of marriage. I pressed my weathered palm against my chest, feeling my own heartbeat synchronize with the machine's steady rhythm, a reminder that I was still very much alive. "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through with startling crystal clarity, not muffled, not distant, but absolutely perfect. "Can you hear me clearly now?" I nodded slowly, almost afraid that speaking might somehow shatter this miraculous restoration. The specialized hearing test headphones still pressed firmly against my ears, and every tone, every whisper, every subtle breath registered with stunning, almost overwhelming clarity. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I carefully removed them. It's all there," I whispered tentatively, then spoke louder, marveling at the rich resonance of my own voice echoing in the sterile hospital room. "Every single sound." Dr. Rodriguez smiled warmly, making detailed notes on her electronic tablet. The stylus scratched softly against the screen surface, another forgotten sound that now seemed precious beyond measure. "The severe inflammation has completely subsided, Mr. Whitmore. Your hearing is now testing at completely normal levels, across all frequency ranges. It's quite remarkable, actually." 23 days earlier, that devastating construction site accident had stolen my entire world of sound. The massive steel beam hadn't actually struck me, but the catastrophic malfunction of those industrial pneumatic drills positioned just feet from my left ear had created some kind of severe acoustic trauma. Complete bilateral hearing loss, the doctors had grimly explained. Possibly permanent, they'd warned, their faces grave with medical uncertainty. But here I was, sitting in this hospital room, listening to what felt like the entire universe coming back to life around me. Elevator bells chiming softly in the distance, measured footsteps echoing in the long corridors, muffled conversations between medical staff, the gentle whoosh of automatic doors opening and closing, the subtle hum of ventilation systems breathing life throughout the building. Kimberly would be absolutely stunned when she saw me. She'd been such a devoted caregiver these past 3 weeks, temporarily moving back into the old family home to help me navigate this challenging new reality. My heart warmed with anticipation thinking about her joyful reaction when I walked through that front door and called out her name in a perfectly clear voice. "I need to call my daughter immediately," I said, eagerly reaching for my cell phone with shaking fingers. "Actually, let's complete the entire discharge process first," Dr. Rodriguez replied diplomatically. "We want to ensure everything is properly documented before you leave our care." I signed the discharge papers with trembling hands, my eyes barely scanning the dense medical terminology. The ballpoint pen scratched against the thick paper, yet another sound I'd completely forgotten existed. Nurse Patricia, a kind woman in her 50s with gentle eyes, carefully explained my follow-up appointment schedule, but honestly, I was only absorbing about half of her words. My mind kept wandering to Kimberly's face, imagining her expression transforming from concern to pure joy when I demonstrated my miraculous recovery. "Take things slowly for the first several days," Patricia was saying, her voice filled with professional concern. "Your brain needs adequate time to readjust to processing all these complex auditory inputs again after such an extended period." I thanked both Dr. Rodriguez and Patricia profusely. then walked purposefully toward the elevator bank, my footsteps echoing distinctly in the polished hallway. Each individual sound felt like an extraordinary gift being carefully unwrapped. The elevator doors opened with their familiar soft chime, and I stepped inside, pressing the button marked P3 for the parking garage. Even that tiny mechanical click seemed profoundly meaningful. My reliable Honda Accord waited patiently in the exact same spot where Kimberly had dropped me off 23 days earlier. I remembered feeling so frightened then, facing the terrifying possibility of permanent deafness. Now, starting the familiar engine, I actually laughed out loud at the comforting rumble. The radio activated automatically, some classic rock station Eleanor used to enjoy during our weekend drives through the Montana countryside. "Everything truly does happen for a reason," I said aloud, repeating one of Eleanor's favorite philosophical observations during life's most challenging moments. My voice sounded strange in the car's enclosed space, but it was wonderfully, reassuringly clear. The 20-minute drive home passed in a blur of rediscovered auditory experiences. Traffic hummed constantly around me. Other engines revving at stoplights, brakes squeaking on wet pavement, distant car horns honking in afternoon frustration. I'd completely forgotten how incredibly noisy the modern world actually was, how vibrantly alive with constant sound. My quiet suburban neighborhood looked exactly the same as always. Neat rows of well-maintained houses with their carefully manicured lawns and freshly painted driveways. Mrs. Davidson was working in her garden next door, her metal rake scraping rhythmically against the concrete walkway. 3 houses down, neighborhood children played enthusiastically in their backyard, their innocent laughter carrying clearly on the crisp October breeze. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and another immediately answered from across the tree-lined street. I pulled slowly into my familiar driveway and sat quietly for several moments, studying the modest 2-story colonial house Eleanor and I had purchased 32 years ago with our first VA loan. Kimberly's silver Toyota Camry was parked neatly beside the stone walkway. She must be inside right now, probably preparing an early dinner or watching her usual afternoon television programs. My hand hesitated on the door handle as I considered my options. Should I call out immediately upon entering, announcing my miraculous recovery? Or should I surprise her completely? Maybe find her in the kitchen and simply start speaking normally, watching her beloved face transform with pure amazement and joy. I decided on the complete surprise approach. Walking up the familiar front steps, I could clearly hear voices emanating from somewhere inside the house. Kimberly and her husband Derek were talking in what sounded like the kitchen area. Perfect timing. I could surprise them both simultaneously. I carefully inserted my house key into the front door lock as quietly as possible, and slowly eased the heavy door open. The voices became increasingly clear as I stepped into the front hallway, and what I heard in those first few seconds would haunt me for the rest of my life. God, that pathetic old burden is finally coming home again today. Kimberly's voice carried clearly from the kitchen, sharp with unmistakable irritation and contempt. I froze completely, my hands still gripping the doorknob as those devastating words hit me with more force than that falling steel beam ever could have. Burden. My own daughter had called me a burden. Derek's voice followed immediately, equally clear and callous. At least the insurance settlement money helped cover most of his medical expenses. Could have been much worse for our finances. My legs suddenly felt weak and unsteady. I pressed my back firmly against the hallway wall, hardly daring to breathe. This had to be some kind of terrible mistake. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. My hearing was just returning after all these weeks. Perhaps I'd misinterpreted their conversation. But Kimberly's next words completely destroyed any hope of misunderstanding. I honestly just want this entire nightmare over with as soon as possible. 3 weeks of pretending to care about his every trivial need and concern. I'm absolutely exhausted from this charade. The world seemed to tilt dangerously around me as those cruel words sank in. These were my daughter's true feelings, my daughter's actual voice, speaking about me as if I were some unwanted burden, an inconvenient obligation she was forced to endure. This was the same daughter I'd supported through 4 years of expensive college, helped financially through her messy divorce, welcomed into my home whenever she needed help or just wanted to visit. I remained perfectly motionless in that hallway, listening to the two people I'd trusted most completely in the world, suddenly realizing they had absolutely no idea I could hear every single word of their devastating conversation. My chest felt as if someone had reached inside and violently twisted everything around. The familiar hallway seemed to stretch and contract with each thundering heartbeat as Kimberly's words echoed mercilessly in my mind. That pathetic old burden. 23 days of believing she was there because she genuinely loved me, because she truly wanted to help her father through the worst health crisis of his entire life. I'd been such a complete fool. My legs threatened to give out beneath me, but I forced myself to remain upright, pressed against the wall like a man hiding from enemy fire. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before making any critical decisions about my future. Moving as carefully as possible along the hallway, I positioned myself closer to the kitchen doorway. Their conversation continued, and each word felt like another nail being driven into the coffin of my trust. Sunset Manor received excellent reviews online, Kimberly was saying with the tone of someone discussing a vacation resort. And it's not prohibitively expensive. The insurance settlement should easily cover the initial security deposit and first few months. Derek chuckled softly, a sound that had once seemed warm and friendly to me. Once he's permanently out of here, we can finally start those major renovations we've been planning. New granite countertops in the kitchen, maybe knock out that load-bearing wall between the dining room and living room. The real estate agent said those improvements could add at least $60,000 to the overall property value, Kimberly added with obvious excitement. Maybe even more, depending on what we decide to do with that outdated master bathroom. They were planning my entire future as if I were already dead, discussing my house, Eleanor's house, our house, as if it were already legally theirs to renovate and sell. I gripped the wall so hard my knuckles turned white, fighting desperately to keep my breathing completely silent. But they weren't finished destroying my faith and family. "Think the old man suspects anything at all?" Derek asked casually. "Are you serious?" "He can't hear a single thing," Kimberly replied with obvious contempt. "Poor old man just sits there nodding and smiling blankly while I write him those simple notes. It's actually kind of pathetic to watch." The sheer contempt in her voice, my own daughter's voice, made my stomach lurch violently. I thought about all those carefully written notes she'd composed over the past 3 weeks. All those exaggerated smiles and gentle pats on my shoulder that I'd interpreted as loving concern. It had all been performance, every single gesture. I had to test this revelation. I had to see exactly how convincing their acting abilities really were when they thought they had a completely oblivious audience. Taking a deep breath, I mentally coached myself. Act confused and grateful. Act like the helpless old man they believe you to be. Watch their faces carefully and observe how skillfully they can lie to someone they think can't possibly catch them in their deception. I walked into the kitchen, making sure my footsteps were slightly heavier and more uncertain than usual, like someone still struggling with balance issues. Kimberly and Derek were sitting comfortably at the kitchen table, and their transformation was immediate, complete, and absolutely chilling. "Dad!" Kimberly jumped up instantly, her face flooding with what appeared to be genuine concern and relief. She rushed over and took my arm gently, supportively. "How are you feeling? You look tired. The appointment wasn't too stressful, was it?" The same voice that had called me a pathetic burden 60 seconds earlier now dripped with perfectly performed sweetness and care. Derek raised his voice unnecessarily, the way people instinctively do when they believe someone has severe hearing difficulties. "Hey there, Thomas. How did the medical appointment go? Any encouraging news from the doctors?" I nodded slowly and shrugged with deliberate confusion, then pointed questioningly to my ears with an expression I hoped conveyed cautious hope. Kimberly immediately grabbed a notepad from the kitchen counter. She'd become quite proficient at this routine over the past 3 weeks. She wrote in large, clear letters, "Doctor says hearing might return gradually. That's wonderful news." I read the note carefully, letting hope and gratitude flood my facial expression. Inside, I was cataloging every single detail of her Oscar-worthy performance. The way she widened her eyes to appear excited and optimistic. The way she squeezed my shoulder as if she was genuinely sharing in my joy and relief. The way Derek nodded enthusiastically beside her, as if he cared about anything other than when I'd be permanently removed from his path to my inheritance. Derek leaned forward and wrote his own note on the pad. Maybe we should start researching care options for when you're feeling stronger. Just temporary assistance until you're fully recovered. Just so you have professional help with medications and physical therapy, Kimberly added quickly, writing below his words. Nothing permanent, of course, just extra support during your recovery period. I nodded eagerly, as if this sounded like wonderful, caring news. Inside, I noted how smoothly they'd transitioned from discussing nursing homes as a permanent solution to presenting it as temporary medical assistance. They'd clearly rehearsed this conversation, thought through every potential objection or concern. For the next several minutes, I played my assigned role perfectly. I pointed at various objects and looked confused when they responded with normal speech. I nodded gratefully when Kimberly wrote down simple questions about whether I was hungry or needed anything for comfort. I even managed what I hoped looked like a tired but contented smile when Derek patted my back and wrote, "We're so grateful you're okay and recovering well." Every single gesture felt like swallowing liquid poison, but I forced myself to maintain the performance flawlessly. I needed to gather more intelligence. I needed to understand exactly what they had planned and how much time I had before they attempted to execute their scheme. Finally, I pointed toward the staircase and wrote my own note. Very tired, going to rest upstairs. Kimberly actually hugged me, physically embraced me, and said loudly, "Of course, Dad. You rest as much as you need to. Take care of yourself." I walked slowly toward the stairs, feeling their watchful eyes following my every movement. Just before I reached the first step, I heard Derek's voice, much quieter now, but still perfectly audible to my restored hearing. He bought every word of it completely. The old man has no idea what's really happening. I climbed those stairs one deliberately slow step at a time, my hand gripping the wooden banister to prevent myself from shaking with rage and heartbreak. When I finally reached my bedroom, the bedroom Eleanor and I had shared for 30 years of marriage, I closed the door quietly and sat heavily on the edge of our bed. The house felt fundamentally different now. The walls that had always represented safety, family, and unconditional love now felt like the walls of a prison. The daughter I'd raised with love and sacrifice had become a stranger wearing Kimberly's familiar face, and apparently I was nothing more than an obstacle standing between her and what she considered rightfully hers, my money, my property, my life's work. I stared at the framed photograph on my nightstand. Kimberly at her college graduation, her arm wrapped lovingly around my shoulders, both of us grinning proudly at the camera. That young woman was gone, assuming she'd ever truly existed at all. But I was far from helpless. They thought they were dealing with a confused, deaf old man who would gratefully accept whatever minimal care they chose to provide. They had absolutely no idea what they'd awakened. Eleanor's simple gold wedding ring still rested in the small ceramic dish on my nightstand, exactly where she'd placed it every night for 3 decades. I picked it up with trembling fingers, remembering how she used to unconsciously twist it when she was thinking through complex problems. She would have known instinctively how to handle Kimberly's betrayal. Eleanor always possessed an uncanny ability to see through people's facades better than I ever could. From downstairs, I could hear their voices continuing their conversation in the kitchen. They believed they had unlimited time to plan my future, completely unaware that their intended victim was listening to every word of their conspiracy. I set Eleanor's ring back in its place and moved carefully toward my bedroom door. This old house had excellent acoustic properties. I'd helped design some renovations myself 20 years ago when we'd updated the heating system. The heating vent near the stairs carried sound from the kitchen beautifully, and if I positioned myself precisely right in the upstairs hallway, I could hear their entire conversation with perfect clarity. I tested each step carefully, remembering which floorboards had developed creaks over the decades. The third step from the bottom groaned loudly on its left side, but the right edge remained silent. Knowledge gained from 32 years of living here was now serving a purpose I'd never imagined possible. Sunset Manor charges $4,800 monthly, Derek was saying when I reached my optimal listening position. But Medicare will cover approximately 60% if we obtain the proper medical evaluations and documentation. Kimberly's voice carried clearly through the heating vent. The real estate agent said we could realistically get at least $470,000 for this property. After paying off the remaining mortgage balance, that leaves us approximately $320,000 for the down payment on that beautiful house in Whitefish Bay we've been wanting. My house, the home Eleanor and I had built our entire life around, where we'd raised our children, where she'd taken her final breath. They were discussing it like a simple commodity to be liquidated. "What's our realistic timeline?" Derek asked, with the tone of a business planner. 2 months maximum, possibly less, Kimberly replied. "We need to establish a clear pattern of mental incompetence first. Document specific incidents, obvious memory issues, signs of confusion. Dr. Mitchell owes me a significant favor from when I helped him secure financing for that expensive boat he wanted. He could write up whatever medical evaluation we require." I gripped the banister so tightly my knuckles turned white. They weren't simply planning to abandon me or place me in assisted living. They were planning to fabricate evidence of mental decline, to systematically destroy my reputation and independence through fraudulent medical documentation. Footsteps moved across the kitchen floor, and Kimberly's voice grew closer to my position. "I should probably check on him, make sure he's not becoming suspicious about anything." I moved quickly but silently back to my bedroom, positioning myself on the bed as if I'd been resting peacefully. I'd learned to control my breathing during those long, sleepless nights caring for Eleanor during her final illness. Kimberly's footsteps climbed the stairs, carefully avoiding that creaky third step. I noticed she'd learned the house's acoustic quirks during her stay here. "Dad?" she called loudly from my doorway. "I brought you some herbal tea, chamomile to help you relax." I opened my eyes slowly, blinking as if slightly disoriented from sleep. Kimberly stood in my doorway holding a steaming mug, her face perfectly arranged in the expression of loving concern that now made my stomach turn with revulsion. She set the mug carefully on my nightstand, right next to Eleanor's ring dish. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, my wife's cherished memory being displaced by my daughter's calculated deception. "You looked exhausted earlier," Kimberly said, speaking slowly and clearly. "Are you feeling all right? Any dizziness or confusion?" I nodded and reached for my notepad, writing, "Thank you so much. You're incredibly good to me." The words tasted like pure poison as I wrote them, but Kimberly's smile brightened with satisfaction. She patted my shoulder with what might have appeared to be affection to anyone who couldn't see the cold calculation in her eyes. "Rest as much as you need, Dad," she said with practiced care. "Derek and I are taking care of absolutely everything. You don't need to worry about a single thing." After she left my room, I remained motionless, listening to her footsteps retreat down the stairs. Then I heard her voice again, reporting back to Derek like a spy returning from a reconnaissance mission. "He's completely clueless, just exactly as we planned," she said with obvious satisfaction, drinking his tea like an obedient patient and writing grateful little notes. Derek chuckled with genuine amusement. "Perfect. Maybe we should accelerate our timeline even further. Why wait 2 months when we could move faster? Mitchell could conduct the evaluation as early as next week. We could say Dad's been having episodes," Kimberly agreed, her voice taking on a clinical tone. "Wandering around confused, forgetting to eat meals, leaving the gas stove burning. Standard dementia progression symptoms." Derek paused thoughtfully, and I found myself holding my breath in anticipation. "That could definitely work if we can document several more incidents over the next couple of weeks. Create a paper trail of concerning behaviors." "Exactly," Kimberly agreed enthusiastically. "By the end of this month, we could have him officially declared incompetent and be seriously looking at house listings in Whitefish." I stared at the bedroom ceiling, my mind racing through the implications. They weren't just betraying my trust and love. They were planning to systematically erase me as a functioning human being, strip away my independence, my dignity, my home, and everything that made life meaningful and worth living. But they'd made one critical, potentially fatal mistake in their planning. They thought they were dealing with a helpless, deaf old man who would passively accept whatever fate they decided to impose upon him. They had absolutely no idea that every single word they spoke was building an ironclad case against them. I reached carefully for my wallet and pulled out a business card I'd kept there for over 3 years. Benjamin Hartley, attorney at law. He'd handled Eleanor's estate with great skill and compassion, and had been gently encouraging me to update my own will for months. Tomorrow morning, I would call Ben immediately. Tonight, I would continue listening to every word they said, gathering evidence of their conspiracy. They thought they wanted to play dangerous games with an old man's life and future. I was about to demonstrate exactly how dangerous that strategy could be. The business card felt substantial and reassuring between my fingers as I made my way to the study, the same room where I'd carefully managed our family finances for over 3 decades. Benjamin Hartley's contact information was printed in conservative navy blue ink, matching the organized folder where I kept all our important legal documents. I pulled open the metal filing cabinet and began systematically searching through years of meticulously organized records, bank statements, tax returns, receipts, insurance policies, the complete paper trail of a life spent responsibly providing for others. What I discovered made my chest tighten with profound sadness and anger. Kimberly's wedding receipt, $38,000. I clearly remembered cashing out a substantial portion of my 401k retirement fund, then working overtime for 8 months to rebuild what I'd sacrificed for her perfect day. "Make it absolutely beautiful, Dad," she'd pleaded with tears in her eyes. Mom would have wanted everything to be perfect and elegant. Student loan payment statements. $32,000 in payments I'd made after her graduation when she couldn't find work immediately. Kimberly crying in my kitchen at age 22, terrified about her financial future. "Dad, I can't possibly finish my master's program. The debt is overwhelming." I'd written those monthly checks without hesitation, believing I was investing in my daughter's future. Apartment security deposit, $18,000. Another significant chunk of my retirement savings. Another sacrifice made gladly because she was my daughter, and claimed to desperately need help getting established in her career. But I also found something else that made my hands shake with rage. Eleanor's medical bills from those agonizing final months. $73,000 in specialized treatments that insurance refused to cover. Bills I'd paid entirely alone while Kimberly found increasingly creative excuses to stay away from her dying mother. "I just can't handle seeing her like this, Dad," she'd said repeatedly. "It's too emotionally devastating for me. You understand, don't you?" The numbers blurred as my hands trembled with emotion. Over $150,000 given freely, sacrificially, to a daughter who now called me a burden and was actively planning to steal my independence. I pulled out a photograph from Kimberly's college graduation. She stood proudly between Eleanor and me, arms wrapped around both our shoulders, her smile radiant with hope and possibility. "I couldn't have achieved any of this without your sacrifices, Dad," she'd whispered that day. "I'll never ever forget how much you've given up for me. I promise I'll take care of you when you need it." The memory triggered a flood of others, rushing back like water through a broken dam. Kimberly at 19, sobbing over student debt. Everyone else has parents who can actually help them financially. I'm so embarrassed. Never considering the extra shifts I was already working, the vacation Eleanor and I had canceled to afford her textbooks and supplies. Kimberly at 25, planning her elaborate wedding. "You'll always have a home with Derek and me, Dad. That's a solemn promise. Family takes care of family." Derek nodding beside her with rehearsed sincerity, his gratitude obviously scripted. Kimberly at 34, missing Eleanor's funeral arrangements because Derek had a potentially career-advancing conference in Denver. "You understand, don't you, Dad? It's a huge promotion opportunity. Mom would want him to go and succeed." Standing alone in the funeral director's office, making decisions about my wife's memorial service while my daughter networked 2,000 miles away. And Eleanor, in those heartbreaking final weeks, asking the question that shattered my heart daily. Where's Kimberly today? I thought she was coming to visit. Me lying with practiced efficiency. She'll be here tomorrow, sweetheart. She's just extremely busy with work. Eleanor nodding sadly, accepting the lie because she desperately wanted to believe her daughter cared enough to visit. The pattern was painfully clear now. Kimberly taking, always taking, while offering empty promises as down payments on future needs. And me, enabling every request because I had confused financial generosity with genuine love and family loyalty. I opened my most recent bank statement and compared my available funds to nursing home costs. Sunset Manor at $4,800 monthly would completely consume my life savings in less than 4 years. But that timeline wasn't their primary concern. They wanted immediate access to the house sale proceeds for their new life in Whitefish Bay. When had Kimberly last called simply to talk without wanting something? When had she asked about my daily life, my health concerns, my loneliness after losing Eleanor? Every conversation in recent years had ended with a request: help with Derek's car payment, loan money for their anniversary vacation, contribute to their kitchen renovation project. Eleanor had seen the truth even then, had tried to warn me with her characteristic gentleness. You're creating an unhealthy dependency, Thomas, she'd observed after I'd paid for Kimberly's 4th car repair in 8 months. She needs to learn to solve her own problems independently. She's our daughter, I'd argued defensively. We help family when they need us. There's a significant difference between helping and enabling, Eleanor had replied prophetically. And there's an even bigger difference between genuine gratitude and entitled expectation. Now surrounded by overwhelming evidence of my misguided generosity, I finally understood what my wise wife had been trying to tell me. Kimberly hadn't learned to appreciate my help or sacrifices. She'd learned to expect them as her due. When I became the one requiring care and support, she'd seen only an inconvenient burden blocking her access to what she'd always considered rightfully hers. I looked at that graduation photograph one final time, then deliberately placed it face down in the drawer. The young woman in that picture was gone, if she'd ever truly existed at all. In her place was a calculating adult who would fabricate mental illness to steal my independence, who would conspire with corrupt medical professionals to have me declared incompetent, who would sell the home where her mother died to fund her own selfish dreams. But I wasn't confused or helpless. I was angry, and I was going to call Benjamin Hartley first thing tomorrow morning. I reached for my address book, flipping to the H section where I'd written his home number years ago. Some conversations were too urgent to wait for normal business hours. Kimberly had taught me a valuable lesson about family loyalty and gratitude. Now I was going to teach her an equally valuable lesson about consequences. I woke the next morning with Benjamin Hartley's business card still clutched firmly in my hand. The digital numbers on my bedside alarm clock read 7:15 a.m., and I could already hear Kimberly moving around efficiently in the kitchen below, preparing what she probably considered another day's performance as the devoted, caring daughter. From my bedroom window, I watched Derek loading several bags into their Toyota Camry. Their voices drifted up through the crisp morning air, something about grocery shopping and running errands. Perfect timing. I needed them away from the house for what I had planned. I made my way downstairs, moving with the careful, uncertain steps of someone still supposedly adjusting to severe hearing loss. Kimberly looked up from the gas stove where she was preparing scrambled eggs, her smile artificially bright and welcoming. "Good morning, Dad," she called out with exaggerated volume. "I made your favorite breakfast, eggs with cheese and those turkey sausages you enjoy." I nodded gratefully and pointed to my ears with a questioning, hopeful expression. She immediately grabbed her ever-present notepad and wrote in large letters, "Derek and I need to go grocery shopping this morning. Will you be comfortable alone for a few hours?" I wrote back carefully, "Yes, thank you for taking such wonderful care of me." The lie felt like swallowing glass, but Kimberly's pleased expression confirmed she believed my gratitude completely. She actually kissed my forehead, a gesture that once would have filled my heart with warmth, and now made my skin crawl with revulsion. "We'll be back around 3 o'clock, she said, speaking slowly and clearly. "There's homemade soup in the refrigerator if you get hungry," and I left emergency numbers on the counter. After they finally left at 10:30 a.m., I waited exactly 20 minutes before reaching for the telephone. Old habits from my engineering career died hard. Always double-check your measurements, always verify your timeline, always have multiple backup plans. Benjamin Hartley answered on the second ring, his voice professionally warm. "Hartley Law Office. Ben, this is Thomas Whitmore. I need to change my will immediately, and I mean today." There was a pause filled with obvious concern. "Thomas, I was under the impression you were experiencing severe hearing difficulties. How are you able to—" "It's complicated, Ben. Can you see me this morning? This is extremely urgent." "Well, I suppose I could accommodate you around 11:45, but Thomas, are you certain you're mentally—" "I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life." The drive to downtown took 18 minutes through moderate traffic. Ben's law office occupied a beautifully restored Victorian house on West Pine Street, the same building where he'd helped me navigate Eleanor's estate 5 years earlier with such skill and compassion. Mrs. Henderson, his longtime secretary, looked genuinely surprised to see me walking in unassisted and apparently hearing normally. "Mr. Whitmore, how wonderful that you're feeling so much better," she said, speaking at normal conversational volume. "Much better indeed, thank you." Benjamin emerged from his private office, a distinguished man with silver temples who'd been handling my legal affairs for over 12 years. His handshake was firm and confident, though his expression showed obvious concern. "Thomas, I have to ask directly, are you experiencing any cognitive difficulties? Any memory problems or mental confusion?" I looked him directly in the eyes. "Ben, I need you to completely rewrite my will so that everything goes to Andrew. Everything. The house, all savings accounts, investment portfolios, life insurance policies, everything." "And Kimberly?" he asked carefully. "Kimberly gets exactly $1,000, along with a note explaining that it's for reasons she will fully understand." Ben's eyebrows rose significantly, but he'd been practicing law long enough to know when not to probe too deeply into family matters. "This represents a quite dramatic change from your current will, Thomas. Are you absolutely certain about this decision? Draft the papers immediately. I'll sign them today." For the next 90 minutes, we worked through every detail meticulously. The house now valued at approximately $470,000, my savings account containing $196,000, my investment portfolio worth another $140,000, life insurance policies totaling $80,000, a complete estate valued at approximately $786,000, all of it now destined for Andrew in Portland instead of the daughter who had called me a burden. "I'll need properly witnessed signatures for the legal documents," Ben explained, reviewing the final draft carefully. "Use your office staff," I replied. "And Ben, I want a sealed copy to take home with me today." That's somewhat unusual, but certainly doable under the circumstances. By 1:30 p.m., the new will was signed, properly witnessed, and officially filed. I walked out of Ben's office carrying a sealed envelope containing my copy, feeling lighter than I had in months, not because of what I'd taken away from Kimberly, but because of what I'd taken back, complete control over my own life and future. At home, I placed the envelope prominently on the kitchen counter, positioned exactly where Kimberly would immediately notice it when she returned from their shopping trip. Then I settled into my comfortable recliner in the living room with the daily newspaper, where I could easily hear everything that happened in the kitchen. At 2:50 p.m., I heard their car doors slam shut in the driveway. Kimberly's voice carried through the front windows. "I hope he didn't try to cook anything while we were gone. Last thing we need is a kitchen fire." The front door opened with its familiar creak, followed by the rustle of grocery bags and footsteps heading directly toward the kitchen. Then absolute silence. Then a sharp intake of breath that could have shattered glass. The envelope crackled loudly as Kimberly tore it open with trembling fingers. I could hear every sound from my strategic position in the living room, the rip of heavy paper, the rustle of legal documents, Then a silence so complete it felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. Derek. Her voice was barely above a whisper, filled with shock and disbelief. Derek, get in here right now. Right? Heavy footsteps pounded across the kitchen floor with obvious urgency. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Look at this, Kimberly said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Look at what that manipulative old bastard did behind our backs. Papers rustled frantically as Derek apparently grabbed the documents. What do you mean? What is this? He changed his will, Derek. He completely rewrote his entire will. Kimberly's voice was rising dangerously. Everything goes to Andrew now. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, everything. I held my breath, straining to catch every word while maintaining my relaxed pose behind the newspaper. This was better than I'd dared hope. That can't possibly be legal, Derek said, his voice sharp with alarm and growing panic. When did he do this? How could he do this? It's dated today, Derek. Today? While we were out buying groceries like good little caregivers, he was downtown signing away our entire future with some lawyer. A kitchen chair scraped violently against the floor, followed by the sound of someone pacing frantically. How much money are we talking about here? The house alone is worth $470,000, Kimberly said, her voice cracking with emotion. Plus his savings, plus his investment portfolio, plus life insurance. Derek, we just lost over $700,000 to my brother who hasn't visited in over 2 years. There has to be a legal way to challenge this, Derek said desperately. Mental incompetence, undue influence, coercion, something. Kimberly's laugh was bitter and sharp as broken glass. Oh, there's more, Derek. Listen to this beautiful detail. To Kimberly Ann Whitmore Miller, my daughter, I leave the sum of exactly $1,000 for reasons she will completely understand. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of heavy, angry breathing. For reasons she will understand? Derek repeated slowly, his voice filled with growing dread. What the hell does that mean? It means he knows, Kimberly said, her voice going cold and calculating. Somehow that supposedly senile old man figured out exactly what we were planning. That's impossible, Derek protested. He can't hear a damn thing. We've been talking right in front of him for weeks about everything. Then explain this, Kimberly snapped, and papers slammed down hard on the counter. Explain how a confused, deaf old man managed to get himself to a lawyer's office and rewrite his entire will without us having any idea. I forced myself to breathe slowly and evenly, maintaining the perfect rhythm of someone peacefully napping. Every instinct screamed at me to smile, to laugh, to reveal the beautiful trap I'd set. But the game was far from over. Okay, Derek said, his voice taking on forced calm. Let's think about this logically. Maybe he's not as mentally impaired as we thought. Maybe he's been testing us somehow. Testing us? Kimberly's voice rose to a dangerous pitch. Testing us by pretending to be deaf while we planned his entire future? That manipulative son of a... Keep your voice down, Derek hissed urgently. He's right there in the next room. I don't care if he hears me, Kimberly snarled. If he's been playing games with us, then the games are over now. Footsteps moved toward the living room with obvious hostile intent. I closed my eyes completely and let the newspaper droop slightly in my hands, perfecting the image of an elderly man dozing peacefully in his favorite chair. Dad. Kimberly's voice was sickeningly sweet again, but I could hear the barely restrained fury underneath. Dad, are you awake? I stirred slowly and deliberately, blinking with genuine confusion as I looked up at her. Her face was flushed red with anger, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. Oh, Kimberly, I said with innocent warmth. Did you have a pleasant shopping trip? Did you find everything you needed? She stared at me for a long, intense moment, searching my face desperately for any sign of deception or awareness. Dad, did you go anywhere today while we were out shopping? I tilted my head with genuine puzzlement. Go somewhere? No, sweetheart, I stayed right here all day. Why would I go anywhere? I'm still recovering. You didn't visit anyone? Make any phone calls? Any appointments? Phone calls? I touched my ears with a sad, apologetic smile. Kimberly, I can't hear well enough for phone calls right now. You know that better than anyone. Kimberly's jaw tightened visibly, but she forced her expression back into caring concern. Of course, I'm sorry, Dad. I forgot about your condition for a moment. She turned and walked back to the kitchen with obvious frustration, and I heard her urgent whisper to Derek. Either he's the greatest actor in the world or we're missing something crucial here. What do you want to do now? Derek asked quietly. Call Dr. Mitchell immediately, Kimberly replied with cold determination. Tell him we need those medical evaluations tomorrow morning, not next week. If Dad thinks he's playing games with us, we'll show him exactly how this game actually ends. Derek paused thoughtfully. And if he really is confused? If this will thing is just some kind of bizarre coincidence? Kimberly's laugh was as cold as winter wind. Then he won't remember signing it anyway, will he? Either way, by Friday afternoon he'll be declared mentally incompetent, and will contest this ridiculous will as the product of a diseased mind. I sat motionless in my chair, newspaper trembling almost imperceptibly in my hands, and felt a smile pull at the corners of my mouth. They had no idea what they were walking into. The sound of Kimberly frantically dialing numbers on the kitchen phone carried clearly to my position in the living room. She was calling someone, and from the way she kept clearing her throat nervously and pacing in tight circles, I could tell she was preparing for a difficult conversation. Andrew, thank God you finally answered, she said, her voice high and strained with artificial emotion. No, everything is definitely not okay. Dad has completely lost his mind. I shifted slightly in my chair, angling myself to hear every single word while maintaining my sleeping pose. This was exactly what I'd been anticipating. He changed his will, Andrew. Everything goes to you now. The house, the savings, all the investments, everything. He's completely cut me out except for some insulting $1,000 token. I could hear Andrew's voice faintly through the phone, asking what sounded like reasonable questions. But Kimberly's responses told me everything I needed to know about his reaction. When? Today, Andrew. While Derek and I were out buying groceries like devoted caregivers, he was downtown signing away my entire future. Kimberly's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine tears. I've sacrificed absolutely everything to take care of him, Andrew. My whole life, my marriage, my career opportunities. She was magnificent, I had to admit. If I hadn't heard her true feelings with my own ears just hours earlier, I might have been moved by the performance myself. He's not mentally competent anymore, Andrew. You have to understand that it's the product of a diseased mind. You need to refuse the inheritance immediately. It should be split fairly between us, the way Mom would have wanted. Andrew's response must have been longer this time because Kimberly fell silent, and I could see her face growing progressively redder through the kitchen doorway. Good reasons? She finally exploded with genuine fury. What possible good reasons could he have? I'm his daughter. I've been taking care of him while you live your comfortable life in Portland, visiting maybe once a year if we're lucky. Another pause. Then her voice turned dangerously cold and venomous. How dare you judge me, Andrew? You send a Christmas card and maybe call on his birthday, and suddenly you're the expert on what Dad needs? You have no idea what I've been through. I heard the phone slam down violently, followed by the sound of Kimberly's angry footsteps stomping around the kitchen. Perfect timing for my next move. I stirred in my chair and looked around with the confused expression of someone just waking from a nap. Kimberly? Was someone on the phone? I thought I heard voices. She whirled around, her face still flushed with rage, but immediately tried to rearrange her features into something resembling motherly concern. Oh, Dad. Yes, I was just talking to Andrew. He wanted to check on how you're feeling. I blinked at her with innocent curiosity, touching my ears with a puzzled expression. Andrew? My son Andrew? Is everything all right? You look upset about something. Dad, we need to talk about your will, about some changes you apparently made today. I stared at her with complete blankness. My will? I don't understand, sweetheart. What changes? I haven't made any changes. I could see the frustration building behind her eyes as she realized she'd have to explain everything to someone she believed couldn't hear properly and was becoming increasingly confused. Never mind, Dad. It's too complicated to explain right now. Why don't you just rest some more? If you're sure everything's all right, I said, standing slowly and carefully. I think I'll go lie down upstairs. All this excitement has me feeling quite tired. I made my way upstairs with the deliberate movements of an elderly man, but once I reached my bedroom and closed the door securely, I moved with swift purpose. My cell phone was hidden in the nightstand drawer, a phone Kimberly didn't even know I possessed. I dialed Andrew's number from memory, my heart pounding with anticipation. Hello? His voice was cautious and uncertain. Andrew, this is Dad. There was a long, stunned pause. Dad? But Kimberly said you were having severe hearing problems. How are you able to call me? Son, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you will shock you completely, but I need you to keep this conversation absolutely confidential between us. Can you promise me that? Of course, Dad. What's going on? What's really happening there? I took a deep breath. Andrew, I can hear every word you're saying perfectly. My hearing came back completely 4 days ago, fully restored. But I haven't told Kimberly because I discovered something that broke my heart. What do you mean, Dad? Because I discovered what she really thinks of me, son. She called me that pathetic old burden. I heard her and Derek planning to put me in a nursing home so they could sell this house and use my money to buy property in Whitefish Bay. Andrew's sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. Dad, are you absolutely certain about this? That doesn't sound like Kimberly. Son, I heard every single word. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They even have a corrupt doctor friend who's going to create false medical evaluations to have me declared mentally incompetent. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. Andrew, are you still there? I'm here, Dad. I'm just trying to process this information. That phone call I just received from Kimberly. She was trying to manipulate me into refusing the inheritance, wasn't she? That's exactly what she was doing. She wants you to think I'm losing my mind so you'll voluntarily give up what I chose to leave you. Dad, I feel sick. I should have known something was wrong. I should have visited more often, paid more attention. You have your own family to take care of, son. I understood that. But now I desperately need your help. From downstairs, I could hear Kimberly's voice again, talking urgently with Derek. They were planning their next move, and from the tone, it wasn't going to be pleasant. Andrew, they're accelerating their timeline. I think they're going to try something drastic tomorrow. What do you need me to do, Dad? Should I drive down there immediately? I can take time off work. Not yet, son. When Kimberly calls you back, and she will call back, I want you to play along with her story. Tell her you're concerned about my mental state. Maybe suggest that you're thinking about visiting this weekend to evaluate the situation yourself. You want me to lie to my own sister? I want you to give her enough rope to hang herself with, Andrew. She's desperate now, and desperate people make critical mistakes. She's going to call you again, probably tonight. She's panicking about losing all that money. From downstairs came the sound of increasingly urgent voices. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Hold on, Andrew. They're planning something right now. Kimberly's voice carried clearly up through the heating vent. Dr. Mitchell confirmed he can do the evaluation Friday morning at 10 o'clock. He'll conduct it right here at the house. Derek responded, What if the old man refuses to cooperate with the examination? He won't have any choice in the matter. Kimberly replied coldly. Mitchell will document that he's displaying obvious signs of dementia, confusion, memory loss, inability to make rational decisions. With this will change as evidence of mental instability. We'll have solid grounds for a competency hearing. And Andrew? Derek asked. Andrew is having serious doubts about Dad's mental state after our conversation. I planted the seeds of concern tonight. If I call him back tomorrow with more alarming details, he might even support having Dad professionally evaluated. I returned to the phone, my voice grim with determination. Andrew, did you hear any of that? Enough to make me furious. Dad, they're planning to have you declared incompetent on Friday morning using a corrupt doctor. We absolutely cannot let that happen. No, we can't. But I have a plan. When Kimberly calls you tomorrow, I want you to sound genuinely worried about me. Tell her you think a medical evaluation might be a wise idea. Dad, I hate lying to family, even family that's betraying you. Son, she stopped being family the moment she decided to steal my independence and sell the home where your mother died. She's counting on your decency and family loyalty to help her commit fraud against me. Andrew was quiet for several moments. You're absolutely right, Dad. What else do you need me to do? Keep playing the concerned brother until I give you the signal to stop. And Andrew, document everything she tells you, every lie, every manipulation attempt. We might need it as evidence later. What exactly are you planning, Dad? I looked around my bedroom. Eleanor's jewelry box on the dresser, our wedding photo on the nightstand, the life we'd built together in this house that Kimberly wanted to sell for her own profit. I'm planning to remind your sister exactly who she's been underestimating all this time. She thinks she's dealing with a confused, helpless old man who can be easily manipulated. Tomorrow she's going to discover just how wrong she's been about that. Be careful, Dad. If she's desperate enough to commit fraud, there's no telling what else she might be capable of. Don't worry about me, son. I survived 35 years as a construction engineer, 5 years of grief after losing your mother, and now this betrayal. I can definitely handle one greedy daughter and her worthless husband. After we ended the call, I sat in the darkness of my bedroom listening to Kimberly and Derek planning their final assault on my freedom and dignity. They had no idea their intended victim had been listening to every word, documenting every lie, and preparing his own devastating surprise. Through my bedroom window, I watched Kimberly and Derek load multiple shopping bags into their Toyota Camry the next morning. Kimberly was gesturing frantically at something on her cell phone while Derek checked his expensive watch for the third time in 2 minutes. We'll be back by 2:30, I heard Derek call toward the house, though they thought I couldn't hear him. Don't forget Dr. Mitchell is coming tomorrow at 10 sharp for the evaluation. Kimberly's voice carried across the driveway in that artificially sweet tone she'd perfected. Dad, we're going shopping and running errands. We'll be back soon. Rest and take care of yourself. I remained motionless behind the bedroom curtains until their car disappeared completely around the corner. Then I allowed myself a satisfied smile. 3.5 hours, more than enough time to prepare their farewell surprise. I walked deliberately through the house, taking careful inventory of their belongings. Kimberly had made herself extremely comfortable in the guest bedroom she'd claimed as her personal space. Her dresser drawers overflowed with expensive designer clothes, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters, jewelry that sparkled even in the dim morning light. All purchased, I noticed, from the scattered receipts on her nightstand, with credit cards that listed my address as the billing location. Derek had claimed the guest closet for his extensive wardrobe. 4 business suits, professional golf equipment, an expensive laptop computer, electronic gadgets I couldn't even identify. The price tag still attached to his golf bag would have fed a modest family for 2 months. From the basement storage room, I retrieved 2 large suitcases Eleanor and I had used for our romantic anniversary trips to Glacier National Park. The leather was still supple and rich, the brass fittings still bright and functional. These bags had carried so many happy memories once. Now they would serve an entirely different purpose. I began with Kimberly's belongings, folding each item with the same meticulous care I'd once used for architectural blueprints. Her preserved wedding dress, still in protective plastic since her marriage to Derek. The photo albums from college, funded entirely with my retirement savings. The jewelry box I'd given her for her 16th birthday, now filled with pieces I'd never seen her wear during family visits. Derek's belongings went into the second suitcase methodically. His expensive electronics, his collection of golf accessories, the leather portfolio containing business cards from jobs he'd never quite managed to maintain successfully. Everything they'd brought into my house, everything they'd accumulated while living under my roof and secretly planning my downfall. As I packed their possessions, I found myself remembering Eleanor's prophetic words from Kimberly's last visit before her wedding. That girl takes everything you give her and always asks for more, Thomas. When will it ever be enough for her? Never, I said aloud to the empty room, my voice echoing off the walls. It will never be enough for people like them. I carried both heavy suitcases to the living room and positioned them prominently in front of the comfortable couch where they absolutely couldn't be missed. The sight was starkly symbolic. 2 pieces of expensive luggage sitting like silent monuments to betrayal in the center of my living room. My phone buzzed with a text message from Andrew. "How are you holding up, Dad? Still planning your surprise for this afternoon?" I typed back carefully, "Everything is ready. Wish me luck, son." His response came immediately. "You've got this, Dad. She deserves everything that's coming to her." I settled into my recliner with the morning newspaper, positioning myself where I could observe the front door clearly. The living room looked perfect. My 2 comfortable chairs, Eleanor's antique china cabinet, the family photos arranged on the fireplace mantel, and those 2 packed suitcases sitting like monuments to betrayal in the center of everything. At 2:25 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of their car pulling into the driveway. Car doors slammed shut, followed by Kimberly's laughter about something amusing Derek had said. Shopping bags rustled in their hands as they approached the front door with obvious good spirits. I took a deep, steadying breath and lowered my newspaper slightly, positioning myself for what would undoubtedly be the performance of my lifetime. The key turned in the front door lock. "I think we got everything we need for tomorrow's—" Kimberly's voice cut off mid-sentence as the front door swung open wide. The sound of heavy shopping bags hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the hallway like gunshots. "What the hell is this?" Derek's voice was sharp with confusion and growing alarm. "Kimberly, are those our suitcases?" Derek asked, his voice filled with bewilderment. I could hear Kimberly's footsteps moving quickly across the floor, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow with what sounded like panic. Dad, what is this?" she called out urgently, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "What are these suitcases doing here?" I kept my newspaper raised carefully, savoring every second of their confusion and panic while maintaining my pose as an elderly man peacefully reading the daily news. Then something extraordinary and revealing happened. Kimberly's voice changed completely, filling with genuine excitement and relief. "Oh my God, Derek, he's finally packed for himself. The old man is actually ready to leave voluntarily." "You mean he's going to Sunset Manor willingly?" Chris caught on immediately, his voice lighting up with obvious joy and relief. "I can't believe it. Finally." Kimberly was practically laughing with happiness now. "He's ready to go to the nursing home. We won't have to go through with the whole Dr. Mitchell evaluation charade. This is absolutely perfect." Derek was pacing with excitement, his footsteps quick and energetic. "We can start the house renovations next week. Maybe even call that contractor in Whitefish Bay we've been researching." $700,000, Derek, Kimberly said with pure greed. "We're finally going to be financially free and independent." They were celebrating. Actually celebrating what they believed was my complete surrender, my total defeat, my willing agreement to disappear quietly from my own life. Every cruel word confirmed exactly who they really were beneath their caring facades. I slowly lowered my newspaper and looked directly at both of them with perfect clarity. "No, sweetheart," I said in a perfectly clear, perfectly calm voice. "You are the ones leaving my house, today." Kimberly's face went white as fresh snow. The excited smile froze on her lips before crumbling into an expression of pure horror and disbelief. "Dad, did you hear me talking?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Derek stepped backward toward the door, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what my clear speech actually meant. "Thomas, how long have you been able to hear us?" I stood slowly from my chair, my joints feeling stronger than they had in months. "Every single word since I got home from the hospital 4 days ago." Kimberly's hand flew to her mouth in shock. "You heard everything we said? Everything? Every conversation about me being that pathetic old burden, every discussion about selling my house, Every plan to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my life savings. Derek's face had gone from pale to deep red. Thomas, we were just frustrated and scared. We didn't mean... You meant every single word. I cut him off firmly. I know exactly who you both are now. Both of you. Kimberly's eyes filled with tears, but I could see the desperate calculation behind them, the wheels turning as she searched for a way to salvage the situation. Dad, we can explain everything. We were just worried about you, concerned that you needed more professional care than we could provide at home. You calculated my net worth down to the last dollar like it was already yours, I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. You planned to have me declared mentally incompetent using forged medical evaluations from your corrupt doctor friend. You celebrated what you thought was my defeat and surrender. That was Derek's idea. Kimberly pointed desperately at her husband. I would never do something like that to you, Dad. You have to believe me. You called me a burden, Kimberly, in my own house, while planning to steal my independence and sell the home where your mother died peacefully. Derek's shock was rapidly giving way to aggressive anger. You can't just kick us out like this. We have nowhere else to go. We gave up our apartment to take care of you. You moved in here because you couldn't afford your own rent, I replied calmly. And now you'll learn what it's like to find housing without my financial help. Kimberly dropped to her knees beside my chair, grabbing my arm desperately with both hands. Please, Dad, I'm your daughter. I made mistakes, but I love you. You're breaking my heart. I looked down at her, this woman who had taken everything I'd ever given her and still demanded more, who had planned to destroy my dignity and independence for money, who had celebrated what she thought was my surrender. If you loved me, Kimberly, you wouldn't have called me a burden. You wouldn't have planned to have me declared mentally incompetent. You wouldn't have celebrated what you thought was my complete defeat. I pointed firmly at the packed suitcases. You have everything you brought into my house, plus everything you've accumulated while living here rent-free and planning my future. That's far more than you actually deserve. Kimberly's carefully maintained composure shattered completely like glass hitting concrete. Tears streamed down her face as she remained on her knees beside my chair, clutching desperately at my arm with both trembling hands. Dad, you're absolutely breaking my heart into pieces. I'm your little girl, your daughter. Please don't do this to me. Her voice cracked with what might have sounded like genuine emotion to someone who hadn't heard her celebrating my supposed defeat just minutes earlier. Mom would be completely devastated to see you treating your own daughter this way. She'd never approve of this cruelty. That was the final straw. I looked down at her with eyes as cold as a Montana winter morning. Your mother warned me about your selfishness and manipulation before she died, Kimberly. She said, watch out for our daughter. She only comes around when she needs something from us. Kimberly's tear-streaked face went ashen. She never said that about me. You're making it up to hurt me. She said it right after you asked me for $5,000 to pay for your anniversary cruise while your mother was dying in hospice care, fighting for every breath. That's not... I never... Kimberly's voice faltered as the painful memory hit her with full force. Derek stepped forward aggressively, trying a different approach. Thomas, look, we all made serious mistakes here, but we're family, and family works through problems together. We can fix this situation. Kimberly seized on his words desperately, her tears switching off like a faucet. Yes, Dad, we can definitely fix this. I'll take much better care of you. We'll cancel everything with Dr. Mitchell. We'll be completely different people, I promise. You showed me exactly who you really are, I replied with unwavering steadiness. And I believe you completely. But people can change, Dad. Kimberly's voice climbed toward hysteria. Give us just one more chance, please. I'm begging you. Derek's attempt at reasonableness was rapidly cracking. His face reddened as his voice rose threateningly. You can't just throw us out like garbage. We have legal rights here. We've been living here for weeks. Actually, Derek, you have zero legal rights to my house. You're not legal tenants with any protections. You're not family members with any legitimate claim. You're house guests who have worn out their welcome completely. We'll contest the will in court. Derek jabbed his finger at me aggressively. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent and unfit. No rational person would disinherit their own daughter. I smiled calmly. Good luck with that legal strategy. My lawyer has detailed recordings of all our conversations about your fraudulent plans. The blood drained from Derek's face instantly. What recordings? You can't legally record private conversations without proper consent. Of course, there were no actual recordings, but the psychological effect was immediate and devastating. Kimberly's eyes went wide with terror. Dad, please. We were just stressed and scared and said stupid things we didn't mean. Please don't ruin our lives over this. You meant every single word you said, I replied firmly. You calculated my net worth down to the last penny. You planned my entire future as if I were already dead and buried. Derek's desperation was making him increasingly aggressive and threatening. Where the hell are we supposed to go now? We don't have any money saved up. We gave up our apartment to take care of you. You moved in because you couldn't afford rent anywhere else, I corrected him. And that's not my problem to solve anymore. Kimberly tried one final emotional manipulation, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she'd perfected as a child when she wanted something expensive. Dad, I gave up my whole life to take care of you here. I sacrificed absolutely everything for you. I loved Mom just as much as you did, and she would want me to inherit something. You missed your mother's funeral planning because Derek had a work party in Denver, I said quietly. You told me it was a big career opportunity that your mother would have wanted him to attend. Kimberly's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. You visited her exactly twice during her final month in hospice care. Twice. I was there every single day, watching her ask where her daughter was, why you never came to see her. I couldn't handle seeing her like that, Kimberly whispered defensively. It was too emotionally devastating. But you could handle planning to put me in a nursing home so you could sell the house where she died peacefully in her sleep. Something in Kimberly's face hardened visibly. The mask of the loving, caring daughter fell away completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Fine, she said, standing up and brushing off her knees with obvious hostility. We'll leave, but you'll regret this decision, Dad. You'll be all alone with nobody, and when you desperately need help, we won't be there for you. I've been alone for 3 years since your mother died, I replied calmly. At least now I won't have to pretend I'm not lonely. Derek grabbed one of the heavy suitcases with excessive force, his anger boiling over. This is completely insane. You're throwing away your own family over misunderstandings. No, I said, watching them both struggle with their expensive belongings. You threw away your family when you decided I was nothing more than an obstacle to your inheritance money. Kimberly picked up the second suitcase, her face twisted with resentment and rage. You'll see, Dad. You'll see exactly what it's like to be truly alone in this world. I'm looking forward to finding out, I replied honestly. They moved toward the front door, their possessions weighing them down like anchors dragging them to the bottom of a lake. At the threshold, Kimberly turned back one final time, her face a mask of cold fury. If you change your mind about this, I won't, I cut her off firmly. And don't call me asking for money ever again. The front door slammed behind them with a finality that echoed through the house like a church bell announcing the end of something significant. I stood at the living room window for several minutes watching Kimberly and Derek struggle to fit their numerous suitcases into their Toyota Camry. Derek had to rearrange bags 3 separate times, cursing loudly under his breath each time something wouldn't fit properly. Kimberly sat rigidly in the passenger seat staring straight ahead with a face like carved stone, her expression a mask of cold, calculating fury. Finally, both car doors slammed shut with violent force. The engine turned over with a grinding sound, and they pulled out of my driveway for what I knew would be the absolute last time. I watched until their red taillights disappeared completely around the corner, then continued watching the empty, peaceful street for several more minutes. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced in years. Not the oppressive, frightening quiet of deafness, not the tense, hostile atmosphere of hidden animosity and secret planning, but genuine peace. Pure, blessed tranquility. The house seemed to exhale around me like a living thing, releasing 3 long years of accumulated stress and negativity. I walked through each room slowly and deliberately, noting the complete absence of their belongings and their toxic presence. Kimberly's expensive moisturizers and cosmetics were gone from the bathroom counter. Derek's golf magazines no longer cluttered the coffee table with their glossy covers. The guest bedroom looked spacious and clean without their clothes scattered carelessly across every available surface. In the kitchen, I found the shopping bags they'd dropped when they discovered the packed suitcases. I carried them directly to the garbage can without bothering to examine the contents. Whatever they'd purchased for their planned celebration of my supposed defeat could rot with the rest of their schemes and manipulations. I settled into my recliner in my living room in my house, and experienced something I hadn't felt since Eleanor's peaceful death 3 years earlier. Complete, total contentment. No one was plotting against me behind my back. No one was calculating my worth or planning my future without my consent. I was alone, but I was finally, blissfully free. My cell phone buzzed insistently on the side table. Andrew calling. "Dad, how did everything go? Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, son. They're gone. It's completely over." "How are you feeling? Are you sure you're all right being alone there?" I considered his question seriously. How was I feeling? Relief, certainly. Vindication without question. But mostly I felt light, as if I'd been carrying an enormous burden for years without even realizing it. "I feel free for the first time since your mother died, Andrew. Truly free. I'm incredibly proud of you, Dad. Standing up for yourself like that took real courage. Mom would be proud of you too. I should have listened to her warnings about Kimberly years ago. Your mother always saw through people better than I did, maybe, but you gave Kimberly every possible chance to be the daughter you deserved. That's not a failure, Dad. That's love. Real, unconditional love." We talked for another 30 minutes. Andrew promised to visit soon, maybe bring his wife Sarah and the children for a long weekend. "They should know their grandfather better," he said warmly. "The real one, not the version Kimberly was trying to create." After we hung up, I prepared myself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs with cheese and buttered toast, and ate it peacefully at the kitchen table while watching the sun set through the clean window. No one complained about my cooking. No one made sarcastic comments about my food choices. No one calculated how much my meal cost or speculated about when I'd be too old and incompetent to cook for myself. I thought about Eleanor's gentle voice, how she used to say, "You deserve so much better than that treatment, Thomas." She'd been talking about Kimberly even then, though I'd been too blind to see the truth. After dinner, I walked through the house one more time, really seeing it clearly for the first time in months. The family photos on the mantel told an honest story now. Pictures of Andrew and his beautiful children, of Eleanor and me on our anniversaries, of holidays when Kimberly was still young enough to genuinely love her family, rather than just their money and what they could provide. I carefully removed the photos that included Kimberly and stored them in a drawer, not out of cruelty or spite, but because I wanted to remember the genuinely good times without the bitter knowledge of how they'd ultimately ended. The mantel looked cleaner somehow, more honest and authentic. In my study, I pulled out a fresh legal pad and began making a comprehensive list of everything I wanted to accomplish. Call the bank about removing Kimberly as my emergency contact. Update all my medical directives and healthcare proxies. Schedule lunch with old friends I'd neglected during Kimberly's manipulative residency. Plan a trip to Portland to visit Andrew and spend quality time with my grandchildren who barely knew me. For the first time in years, I was planning an actual future instead of just enduring each day as it came. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about something Eleanor used to tell me during our early years together, when we were still learning how to navigate marriage and family relationships. "Some people see kindness as weakness, Thomas, but they're completely wrong about that. Kindness is actually strength, and when you finally stop giving it to people who don't deserve it, who take advantage of it, that's wisdom." I'd finally learned the crucial difference between the two. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. with autumn sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I'd slept better than I had in months. No voices plotting in the kitchen below, no footsteps pacing with barely contained greed and resentment. Just the peaceful sound of a man at rest in his own home. I was sipping my morning coffee and reading the newspaper when I heard a car pull into my driveway at exactly 9:55 a.m. Through the window, I watched an unfamiliar silver sedan park where Derek's Toyota had been just yesterday. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit emerged, carrying a black leather medical bag and a clipboard. Dr. Mitchell, I presumed. Right on schedule for his appointment to declare me mentally incompetent. I smiled to myself and took another sip of coffee. This was going to be interesting. The doorbell rang precisely at 10 a.m. I opened the door to find a nervous-looking man in his 50s with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Mitchell. I believe your daughter Kimberly scheduled an appointment for a routine wellness evaluation." I looked at him with perfectly clear eyes and spoke in a strong, confident voice. "I'm afraid there's been some kind of mistake, doctor. I didn't schedule any appointment, and my daughter no longer lives here." Dr. Mitchell's face went pale. He glanced at his clipboard, then back at me with obvious confusion. "But Mrs. Miller said you were experiencing hearing difficulties and some cognitive issues that needed professional evaluation." "My hearing is perfect, as you can clearly tell, and my cognitive abilities are functioning quite well, thank you. May I ask what Mrs. Miller offered to pay you for this fraudulent evaluation?" Dr. Mitchell took a step backward, his face flushing red. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Perhaps we could reschedule when your daughter is present to clarify." "Dr. Mitchell," I interrupted calmly, "I know exactly why you're here. My daughter and her husband plan to have you declare me mentally incompetent using falsified medical records. What I'm curious about is whether you realized you were being asked to commit a serious felony." The doctor's hands were visibly shaking now. "Mr. Whitmore, I assure you that I would never engage in any unethical practices. If there's been some miscommunication, would you like me to call the medical licensing board right now and report this attempted fraud? Or would you prefer to leave quietly and forget this conversation ever happened?" Dr. Mitchell was already backing away toward his car. "I think there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Good day, Mr. Whitmore." I watched him drive away much faster than the speed limit allowed, then closed my door with deep satisfaction. Another problem solved. My phone rang within minutes. Kimberly's number appeared on the screen. I answered cheerfully. "Hello, sweetheart." "Dad?" Her voice was sharp with confusion. "Dr. Mitchell just called me. He said you spoke to him clearly and accused him of fraud. What's going on?" "Nothing's going on, Kimberly. A strange doctor came to my door claiming you'd scheduled an appointment. Since you don't live here anymore and I don't need medical evaluation, I sent him away." "Dad, you can hear me perfectly right now, can't you?" "Yes, dear. My hearing returned several days ago. Completely restored, just like the doctors hoped it might." The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "How long have you been able to hear?" she finally whispered. "Long enough to know who you really are, Kimberly. Long enough to make appropriate changes to my will and my life." "Dad, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter." "You were my daughter," I corrected gently. "Now you're just someone I used to know who tried to steal my independence. Don't call this number again." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I called my phone company and had it blocked there as well. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Andrew's backyard in Portland, watching my 7-year-old granddaughter Emma push her 4-year-old brother Lucas on their swing set. The autumn air was crisp, and Sarah had just brought out hot apple cider and fresh-baked cookies. "Grandpa Thomas," Emma called out, "will you push me higher on the swing?" "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, getting up from my comfortable chair. As I pushed Emma's swing, listening to her delighted laughter, Andrew approached with a serious expression. "Dad, I got a call from Kimberly yesterday. She wanted me to give you a message." I continued pushing Emma's swing steadily. "Oh? What did she want to say?" She's apparently living in a small apartment across town with Derek. They're both working at a call center for minimum wage. She wanted me to tell you that she's sorry and that she's learned her lesson." Emma jumped off the swing and ran toward the house, calling for her mother. Andrew and I stood alone in the quiet backyard. "And what did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her that apologies need to be backed up by changed behavior, not just words, and that some betrayals are so deep they can't be undone with simple apologies." I nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like something your mother would have said. Mom always was the wiser one about people's character." We walked back toward the house where Sarah was setting the table for lunch. Through the large windows, I could see my grandchildren helping their mother, their faces bright with simple happiness. "Andrew, I've been thinking about something. What would you say if I told you I was considering moving to Portland? There are some lovely senior communities here, and I'd be closer to you and the children." Andrew's face lit up with genuine joy. "Dad, I would love that. The kids ask about you constantly and Sarah thinks you're wonderful. We've been hoping you'd consider it. The house in Montana holds too many memories, both good and painful. Maybe it's time for a fresh start somewhere new." Over lunch, we discussed practical details. Sarah showed me listings for several attractive senior living communities that offered independent living with optional services as needed. Emma and Lucas peppered me with questions about what games we could play when I lived closer to them. That afternoon, as I watched Andrew teach his son how to properly throw a football in the backyard, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope for the future. Not just surviving each day, but actually looking forward to what came next. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I worried it might be Kimberly trying to reach me from a different number, but it was from my old neighbor, Mrs. Davidson, back in Montana. "Thomas, I hope you're doing well. A for sale sign appeared in your front yard this morning. I wanted you to know that several neighbors have commented on how much happier and healthier you looked before you left town. We all hope you found peace wherever you are." I showed the text to Andrew. "Your real estate agent works fast. The house should sell quickly. It's a great property in a good neighborhood. Are you sure you're ready for this change, Dad?" I looked around at Andrew's comfortable home, listened to my grandchildren's laughter echoing from the living room where they were building something elaborate with blocks, and felt Sarah's genuine warmth as she offered me more coffee. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, son." 6 months later, I was settled into my new apartment in a beautiful senior community called Sunset Gardens, ironically similar to the name of the nursing home where Kimberly had planned to warehouse me. The difference was that I had chosen this place myself, maintained complete independence, and genuinely enjoyed the company of my new neighbors. Andrew visited every Sunday with the children, and I'd become a regular fixture at Emma's soccer games and Lucas's preschool performances. For the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. I was reading on my apartment balcony one sunny afternoon when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a Montana area code. "Hello? Mr. Whitmore? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Missoula Police Department. I'm calling about a complaint we received regarding potential elder fraud. Do you have a few minutes to speak?" My heart rate increased slightly. "Of course, Detective. How can I help you?" "We've been investigating reports that someone attempted to have you declared mentally incompetent through fraudulent means. A Dr. Mitchell came forward and provided testimony about being approached to falsify medical records. Can you tell me what you know about this situation?" I spent the next hour providing Detective Chen with detailed information about Kimberly and Derek's scheme. I explained about my hearing loss, their conversations I'd overheard, their plans to have me declared incompetent, and Dr. Mitchell's attempted visit. "Mr. Whitmore, elder fraud is a serious felony in Montana. Based on what you've told me and Dr. Mitchell's testimony, we have grounds for charges. Are you willing to provide a formal statement?" "Absolutely, Detective." 2 weeks later, Andrew drove up from Portland to accompany me back to Montana for the legal proceedings. We stayed in a nice hotel downtown rather than the empty house that had already sold to a young family with children. At the courthouse, I testified clearly and calmly about everything that had happened. Dr. Mitchell corroborated my testimony, explaining how Kimberly had approached him about declaring me incompetent in exchange for a substantial cash payment. Kimberly and Derek sat at the defendant's table looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen them. Kimberly kept glancing at me with what might have been pleading in her eyes, but I felt nothing but cold indifference. The judge, an elegant woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Hoffman, listened carefully to all the testimony before rendering her verdict. "Elder fraud is one of the most despicable crimes in our legal system," she began, her voice firm with conviction. "It represents a betrayal of the most fundamental bonds of trust and family loyalty. Ms. Miller and Mr. Miller, you conspired to steal not just your father's money, but his dignity, his independence, and his right to control his own life." She sentenced Kimberly to 18 months in county jail and Derek to 12 months, with an additional requirement that they pay full restitution for my legal fees and court costs. They were also prohibited from contacting me for 5 years after their release. As the bailiffs led them away in handcuffs, Kimberly looked back at me one final time. I met her gaze steadily, without anger or sadness, and nodded once. Acknowledgement that justice had been served, that consequences had finally caught up with choices. Walking out of that courthouse with Andrew beside me, I felt the last weight of betrayal lift from my shoulders. 1 year later, I was celebrating my 73rd birthday at Andrew's house, surrounded by genuine love and laughter. Emma had made me a birthday card decorated with crayon drawings of our family, and Lucas had insisted on helping blow out my candles. Sarah had prepared Eleanor's recipe for chocolate cake. Somehow she'd gotten the recipe from Andrew, who'd saved it from his mother's recipe box. It tasted exactly like the birthdays Eleanor used to create for me, but without any of the sadness. As the evening wound down and the children were getting ready for bed, Emma climbed into my lap with a serious expression on her 7-year-old face. "Grandpa Thomas, Daddy told me that some people were mean to you before you came to live near us. But you're safe now, right?" I hugged her close, marveling at her innocent wisdom. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm completely safe now, and I'm exactly where I want to be." "Good," she said with satisfaction, "because we love you and want you to stay with us forever." After the children were in bed, Andrew, Sarah, and I sat on their back porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear Portland sky. "Any regrets, Dad?" Andrew asked quietly. I considered his question carefully. Did I regret losing the daughter I'd thought I had? Did I regret the years of misplaced trust and misguided generosity? Did I regret the pain of discovering such deep betrayal? "No regrets," I said finally. "Everything that happened led me to this moment, to this life, to understanding what family really means." Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're so grateful you're part of our lives, Thomas. The children adore you, and you've brought such joy to our family." "The feeling is entirely mutual," I replied, meaning every word. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, old habits made me tense, wondering if somehow Kimberly had found a way to contact me despite the restraining order. But it was from Mrs. Davidson, my old neighbor. "Thomas, I drove by your old house today. The new family has 2 young children, and they've painted it a lovely yellow color. There are toys in the yard and flowers in Eleanor's old garden. I thought you'd be happy to know it's filled with love again." I showed the message to Andrew and Sarah, and we all smiled at the thought of new life filling the space where Eleanor and I had built our first dreams together. "It sounds perfect," I said. "Eleanor always said that houses need families to make them complete." As we prepared to go inside, I looked around at this life I'd never expected to have, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. People who celebrated my independence rather than plotting to steal it. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest discoveries. I'd lost a daughter but found a real family. I'd lost my illusions but gained wisdom. I'd lost my old life, but discovered something infinitely better. The peace of being genuinely valued and authentically loved. Eleanor had been right about everything, as usual. Some people see kindness as weakness, but she'd been wrong about one thing. It wasn't just wisdom to stop giving kindness to those who didn't deserve it. It was also the beginning of finding those who truly did. 2 years later, I was teaching Lucas how to play chess on a lazy Sunday afternoon when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. After all this time, I still felt a moment of wariness about unknown callers. "Hello? Is this Thomas Whitmore?" The voice was young, female, and uncertain. "Yes, this is Thomas. Mr. Whitmore, this is difficult to explain, but I think I'm your niece. My mother was Eleanor Whitmore's sister, Rebecca. I found your number through some family records." I set down the chess piece I'd been holding. Eleanor's sister, Rebecca, had died in a car accident 15 years earlier, leaving behind 2 children I'd never met. "Rebecca's daughter? Are you Jenny or Patricia?" "I'm Jenny, Jennifer Morrison now. Mr. Whitmore, I hope this isn't presumptuous, but I've been researching our family tree, and I discovered what happened with your daughter in the legal case. I wanted you to know that not all of Eleanor's family forgot about you." We talked for over an hour. Jenny lived in Seattle with her husband and 2 teenagers. She'd been trying to connect with extended family, particularly after losing her mother so young. "I remember my mother talking about Eleanor with such love," Jenny said. "She always said Eleanor married the kindest man she'd ever met. I'd love to meet you sometime if you'd be interested." "I would be very interested," I replied, feeling another door opening to possibilities I'd never considered. After we hung up, Andrew found me sitting quietly in the living room, staring out the window with what must have been a contemplative expression. "Good news or concerning news?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. "Surprising news. It seems your mother's family isn't as gone as we thought." I told him about Jenny's call, and Andrew's face lit up with the same excitement I was beginning to feel. "Dad, this is wonderful. More family, more connections. Mom would be thrilled to know her sister's children were reaching out." "I was just thinking the same thing," I agreed. "Your mother always believed that love finds a way to circle back, even when we least expect it." Lucas appeared in the doorway carrying the chessboard. "Grandpa Thomas, are you ready to finish our game? I think I know how to beat you this time." "I'm ready," I said, making room on the coffee table for the board. "But I should warn you, I've been playing chess for over 50 years. "That just means you're old," Lucas replied with 6-year-old logic. "I have better ideas because my brain is newer." Andrew laughed, and I realized this was exactly the kind of moment Eleanor had always treasured. 3 generations together, connected by love rather than obligation, building memories that would outlast any betrayal or disappointment. As Lucas set up the chess pieces with intense concentration, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed in just 2 years. From a lonely widower being manipulated by his own daughter, to a grandfather surrounded by genuine family who valued his presence in their lives. Sometimes the worst experiences create space for the best ones. Kimberly's betrayal had forced me to make room for Andrew's love, Sarah's kindness, the children's joy, and now the possibility of reconnecting with Eleanor's extended family. I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood relation or shared history. It's defined by who shows up with love, who celebrates your victories, who supports you through challenges, and who wants you around not for what you can provide but for who you are. Moving Lucas's pawn forward on the chessboard, I smiled at my grandson's determined expression. Eleanor had been right about everything. Love does find a way to circle back, often in forms we never expected. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best chapters of our lives are the ones we get to write after we thought the story was over. "Your move, Grandpa," Lucas announced proudly. "Indeed it is," I agreed, studying the board and planning my next step. "Indeed it is." Thank you for watching this incredible story of betrayal, justice, and ultimately, redemption. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced family betrayal, or do you know someone who has? We'd love to hear your stories and perspectives. Remember, sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up showing us exactly who deserves our love and trust. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up with genuine care and respect for who you are. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of life, family, and the unexpected ways people reveal their true character. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to reclaim your power and surround yourself with people who truly value you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.